Okay, it looks like we are live. Just start by saying thank you for everyone's patience and thank you for joining. It looks like we are live. Just start by saying thank you for everyone's patience and thank you for joining. It looks like we are live.
Okay, I can see what's happening. Have you got a window open with...
Yes, I've closed it. Very sorry about that. Okay, got it. Right, okay, yes, sorry about that. We did say BST time, but yeah, I can understand why people got confused with that timing. Very sorry about that. But yeah, just a quick overview and introduction of myself. My name is Famida. I am BF's Bank to the Future Investor Relations Manager. And this is our third AMA with Simon Dixon. And Simon Dixon is the CEO and co-founder of the online investment platform BnkToTheFuture. Investors have invested over 600 million USD in fintech and blockchain companies such as Bitfinex, Kraken, Bitstamp, Shapeshift, just a few to name. And Simon, of course, if you do not know, Simon is an ex-investment banker turned Bitcoiner. In 2011, he spoke at the first Bitcoin conference in Prague and wrote the book Bank to the Future, which was his first published book to cover Bitcoin. Just a quick overview of how this is going to work. I'm just going to read, I'm going to let Simon introduce himself and give us a quick update of what to expect. And then I'll go through some questions that we received from our communities in the Telegram and from people that registered for this AMA session. Okay, over to you, Simon.
Okay, thank you very much, Fam. This is our third go at this, and I think we're getting better and a bit smoother, and we're mixing up the team at Bank to the Future that's hosting. So thank you very much for that introduction. I'm going to start with a brief overview before we jump into your questions. My goal today is to actually try and answer more questions than I did in AMA 1 and AMA 2. And I'm going to try and get shorter answers, but take more questions. We'll see how that goes. I have a tendency to overspeak, so I'll see if I can control that. Just wanted to give you a 5 to 10 minute overview before we jump straight into your questions. We're going to do 1 hour here. And also you are welcome to try and ask some more questions in the chat. We've got a lot of questions this time. The attendance and the engagement on this one has been the highest we've had compared to AMA 1 and AMA 2. And I'm sure AMA 4 is going to be bigger and better as well. So really we are, I'd say, it seems like we're halfway into the crypto bear market, in my opinion. I personally, if you've seen any of my interviews recently, I've been doing a lot of talks on the bear market. A lot of people asking about price and where the crypto market is in general. Personally, I have seen my $30 Bitcoin crash to $3. I've seen my $1,250 Bitcoin crash to $250, and I've also seen my $20,000 Bitcoin crash to $5,000. And personally, I believe that I'll also see my $100,000 Bitcoin probably crash to $30,000 at some point. It is a cycle. It's a new asset class. It's a very hard thing for people to understand. And 2017 made the whole world aware of Bitcoin and crypto and what we're doing here. For those of you that have been involved in Bank to the Future since the very early days, you'll know that we started in 2010 when we started making our first applications and structuring. And round about then, Bitcoin was only, just over 1 year old. I spoke at the very first Bitcoin conference in the world, and we started investing in the industry through BnkToTheFuture.com, and many of our investors now have equity in some of the most valuable companies in the industry that Fam mentioned in the introduction, some of them to mention a few. We are now into the bear market, and my experience of bear market is that great technology gets built, it filters out the people that understand the economics of our industry, and it always leads to massive progress, great technological innovation, and really a filtering out of those that were here just for the money to those that are here because they actually believe that there's a fundamental difference happening in the world. We personally got involved in this industry because we talked about the future of finance looking very different from the past. And we wanted to invest in the industry. So Bank to the Future was our way of actually being very diversified. We didn't know which companies would succeed and fail, but we knew that the industry was going to look very different in the future. And so we created Bank to the Future so that we could bring the things that we were investing in and allow people to co-invest with us. And we wanted to invest in anything that's involved in the future of finance. And that's still the niche that we play in and the role that we're trying to play. So when we first started doing that, after the long period of trying to secure all the registrations we needed to compliantly offer securities and equity online to investors, we started investing in lots of the equity of all the different companies. And so now we have a portfolio at Bank to the Future where we manage, or we've invested proprietary ourselves in some of the most valuable equity in the industry. And we started to see that just getting disrupted in about 2016, where the token sale craze, it started in 2014. We were investing and facilitating some of the early token sales, like we invested in Ethereum and Mastercoin and Storage and MadeSafe and Factom and some of the early ones. But we started to notice that our equity clients were more interested in token sales. And so we pivoted the model around what our investors were looking for and what the companies were using. And we obviously had the craze and the ultra high returns that were achieved by some people there. And then we've obviously seen a correction in that market and a cooling off and a re-regulation of the market as people start to realize that securities laws apply to a lot of these things. Fortunately, we always had a structure where we sold all these things as securities. So we've always been compliance driven and tried to comply with international securities laws to the best of our abilities in a very fast changing environment. And now what we're seeing at the moment is a resurgence where tokens are not so popular, and our investors are now demanding more equity, and the companies that we're speaking to are willing to offer equity. And we're seeing a re-emergence of equity. In the future, we believe that that will also be taking the best of equity and the best of ICOs and looking at some of the securities token offerings, whereby you can gain some of the liquidity that made ICOs so popular, at the same time as some of the shareholder protections and rights that were granted to actual equity holders and people that own the assets in the companies, and some of the additional things. So we're really in a completely changing market right now. We are right at the cusp and in the interchange between some of that equity becoming ultra high valuable as our industry grew, to ICOs becoming less popular as people are readjusting to the market. There is still a large demand out there for them, but the market's changing. And then we're looking at the securities tokens, which people are looking to adjust to. But at the moment, the infrastructure does not exactly exist. The exchanges don't exist. The liquidity doesn't exist. And a lot of the infrastructure that we're working on at Bank to the Future to facilitate that, and also investing in companies and bringing deals that are facilitating that re-emergence of the security token and that new innovation that's coming to market over the coming years. And so that's really what we're experiencing right now. There's still a huge level of interest in this market, but we're filtering out to the people. And my experience of having been involved in this industry for so long is that it's in these bear markets where true wealth is made. If you're a long-term thinker, if you're spontaneous, if you're doing this for the short term, then maybe you make some money trading. But the long-term investors use these bear markets to accumulate assets while price of Bitcoin and Ethereum is down. They'll use that to try and accumulate as many assets in, if they're, for example, pricing something in dollar terms and accepting Bitcoin and ETH in exchange for their labor or whatever they're doing, then they accumulate a lot more Bitcoin and ETH during a bear market than they would in a bull market, because the prices are higher and they're investing in the longer term game of when the market actually turns around. So that's just a general update on what we're actually seeing right now. But what I really wanted to do is jump right into your questions. And just to explain that, we have people that may be new to the BnkToTheFuture.com brand and may not be our investors yet. They might be looking to actually raise finance through our platform, or they might be a prospective investor that's looking at this industry, looking for an update. We also have people that have been our investors for many years, have a large portfolio of companies, and they're looking for updates and what's coming next. Or you might be one of our token holders that joined our ecosystem more recently through our token sale that we did this year, and looking to find out more about our roadmap and what's coming next. So we'll hopefully, with our questions, tackle all of those things. And FAM's got the job of filtering through. There was people that registered questions in advance, and we'll be taking those. There's people that might have asked them in some of our community groups and Telegram groups. Hopefully after this, we probably don't have them right now, but if you're watching this video after the live event, then we'll add some of our community groups where you can actually ask more questions and be more engaged in some of the activities we're doing. Or you might be on the live chat right now and want to ask some questions in reaction to the things we're actually speaking to, and we'll try and get a mix of that. But those who registered their questions in advance, will try and take those as well as a priority. So Fab, do you want to try and jump straight in? And I'm going to try and get shorter answers to the questions this time.
Sure. Okay. Well, I'll try not to interrupt you because I'm sure everything you're going to say is very relevant. So the first question I see on the list here, there is no name to a couple of these. They're from the community. What plans do you have in place to remain relevant, competitive in the global crypto landscape? Where do you hope to see BnkToTheFuture long term, and what could it mean for initial early investors?
That's a great question. The industry is changing so fast, and it's a great thing that other people are interested. Originally, we were competing with other platforms, but no one was necessarily as niche as we were to the blockchain and Bitcoin industry. And a lot of people are now interested. We've got traditional banks and financial institutions entering the market. We've got many other broker dealers and decentralized platforms, and the ecosystem's just growing a lot more. So what we're excited about is a couple of things. So firstly, we've learned a lot from the token craze. And the first thing that we've got coming up for this year, I know we're almost at the end of the year, is the launch of our secondary market. And so while you might hear a lot of platforms that are being built for ICOs and token sales and securities tokens, we've got a great advantage in that we were accumulating the equity, and we can allow some of our investors to sell that equity if the companies are succeeding on our secondary market. And then people that miss some of those opportunities can get another bite at the cherry, and we can always have opportunities to invest as we grow the market. The second thing that we're doing, and that is, we don't believe that there will be anywhere else to do that. At some point, someone might compete as our industry grows. And we do relish a competition because it means our sector is actually growing, and we tend to partner with people along those lines. You'll see a lot of partnership announcements, and we prefer to have many great investors. So if other platforms that are doing similar things to us, we'd rather have a wide diversity of investors, because we think companies are more likely to succeed when they have better and more diverse investors. So that's one of the things we don't really shy away from. But the second thing is, throughout 2019, and what we're already starting to launch in 2018, is the ecosystem and infrastructure to disrupt ourselves. Because we started such a long time ago, we're reimagining BnkToTheFuture as if we were starting today. And that is with our securities token exchange. So in 2019, we're looking at launching the infrastructure to disrupt ourselves and rebuild our platform through a separate platform, and really think about which one of those will actually succeed. And that's where we're looking at some of the technology that's available to us today that was never available in the past. It starts with the BF wallet, which is our wallet that we are due to launch this year. It's currently being beta tested, and then will be submitted to Apple and Google for submission. And that allows people to hold the BFT token, and it will also allow them to take the balance, connect to their BnkToTheFuture.com account, own their own tokens, and get access to the membership. And then we're looking to expand that into the first securities token wallet. And we're partnering with many of the companies that are building protocols in this industry, and different stuff, such as we were investors in Polymath. Some of the team were investors in us, and some of the other things that are coming through. So the answer, and again, I failed at doing a short answer, but I knew I would, is that we're looking at disrupting ourselves throughout 2019, having different platforms done in different ways, and then also making sure that Bank to the Future is also on the cusp and edge with the secondary market and meeting some of the demands that that our investors are looking for as we improve.
Okay, great. Thank you for that, Simon. I will move on to the next question here, and I think everyone knows that this one is coming. The question is, what is the update on the state of secondary market and approximate expected launch? Which pitches will initially be available? Just all of them, or start out with a few with a slow rollout?
Yep, great question. So the way that we're going to be doing this is we are currently beta testing the technology with the dev team as we speak. We're doing all the front end user experience has all been built, and we're doing some additional work on the back end, making sure that the transaction system is all up to date and able to take this. We are hoping by the end of October to actually launch our first market in beta. And the answer is no, not every single company will be qualified for our secondary market. The goal of the secondary market is to create a marketplace that allow the investors that have invested in companies that are more on a track to success. Their success is more clear. They've achieved a certain level of success, and therefore it creates enough demand for people to want to purchase those off other sellers. We're starting the first stock that we will be doing, the first equity that we'll be offering to our qualifying investors. We'll be making a market in the market that has the most demand and most people that want to trade right now, which is Bitfinex. There's a lot of people that are looking to do OTC trades. They're constantly writing into our support. There's a lot of people that want to accumulate more shares. They've been really happy with the results and the returns that they've actually received there. And therefore, that would be the market that we would naturally first start with. And then we'll be looking through the portfolio and looking at the companies that have been more successful, more established, have more demand, and taking it one market at a time. But initially, the first one, I'm sure when we put the Bitfinex secondary market onto the platform, we'll be learning a lot about the user experience, different currencies that people want to use in order to make those purchases, and some of the things that we may not have fully considered. But yeah, we're looking to do that first market in end of October, launching with Bitfinex and scaling it from there throughout 2019.
Thank you, Simon. And another one that is related to the secondary market. Will the secondary market have protections in place for user error? I would not want to misplace a 0 and sell my holdings for 10% of the intended value, or buy for 1000%.
That's a very good feedback point, and we can take that question to our user experience team to consider that. I don't think we've exactly considered that, but the way that this will work legally is all trades will be final, to be fair to both the buyer and seller, and the user experience should have sufficient warnings so that you can make those decisions just like any other marketplace. We can't have people abusing it because of the reversibility, saying that they made a mistake when really they just wanted to reverse the trade, maybe because the market moved against them or something like that. So it's all about the user interface, making sure that's clear, but we don't have any intention of allowing people to reverse those trades.
Okay. So the next question I have here is, are there any plans to make it accessible to countries like Venezuela?
So we have to operate within the law, our securities laws, and as a company that's actually registered with the Cayman Islands Monetary Authority, we have to adhere to strict AML laws. And there are certain countries in which we're not allowed to operate with as part of our compliance to anti-money laundering. And that is that there's certain sanctioned countries that we're just not allowed to operate with. There are other countries that we are allowed to operate with, but we have to consider them more high risk. And we have to implement according procedures of doing enhanced due diligence on those clients. If you actually want to have a completely borderless world where anyone can trade with anybody, then that's exactly what Bitcoin was created for. And that's what the decentralized marketplaces will actually do. They have both their pros and their cons. One of the biggest pros is inclusion. One of the biggest cons to some of these decentralized marketplaces is things like there is no reversibility. There is no person to actually support you when things go wrong. But as somebody that's actually dealing in securities, then we have to adhere to all rules and regulations that are abided by us. One thing that we have always done is we wish to be as inclusive as we possibly can within the legal systems and legal parameters that we have to operate with in multiple jurisdictions. So as much as I'd love to be inclusive to everyone and everything, the laws don't allow for that right now. If the laws allow for that, then you can bet we will.
Okay, cool. Just have a question that came through on live chat. I thought I'd just throw this one in because we're on jurisdictions. Corey Driscoll says, are there plans to allow accredited US investors to access to more investments?
Absolutely. So for those of you that have been around for a while, you'll know that we actually had a stake in a US broker-dealer that was responsible for onboarding all of our US investors in compliance with SEC regulations and US regulations. We were in a position whereby that US broker-dealer was actually sold to Coinbase. And Coinbase purchased the US broker-dealer. And so therefore, we've been in the market to actually look for a new partner to actually work with us. And so we sold our stake, and that was later sold to Coinbase because they're looking to expand their markets. And we've actually just completed an integration, and this week or next week, we are due to have our first equity pitch for a long time that is actually going to be signed off by our US broker-dealer partner and will be open to our US investors that qualify to invest. So we're really excited about that. We know that the big losers in the market have been the US because the regulations are a bit more restrictive than other countries in terms of who can do that. But we have always set the goal of trying to cater for as many people as we can in compliance with their local securities laws. And we're just doing the final pieces of the puzzle right now. And we look forward to either this Friday or next week launching our first pitch in equity for a long time that will actually be open to US investors going through our broker-dealer partner in compliance with, and the goal being to be in compliance with US securities laws as well as all the others. So great question.
Cool. Yeah. So thanks for mentioning the more equity pitches, because there are actually a few questions that have actually asked about when will BF start seeing more equity pitches. So thanks for that. The next question here I can see is, I'm currently working on a P2P marketplace lending exchange, which facilitates loans between users using digital assets such as BTC and Ether as collateral. With the launch of BFT's secondary market, well, BF's secondary market, would BF be open to the idea of allowing its members to use their investments for the purpose of acquiring loans or a third-party exchange?
Okay, so we've often, for many years, we always wanted to launch a product into the lending market. We didn't quite ever get round to that because the token sale produced, more opportunities, and every time we got round to the lending market, we decided that to focus more on what we've actually doing and what we got market share in. If anyone has a partnership proposal that they would like to put forward to our business development team at BnkToTheFuture.com, then simply go to our website. There's a support link at the bottom, and you'll be able to submit a ticket. And what our team will do is ensure that it gets to the right people. We can't promise that we'll get back to everybody if you have a partnership proposal, but we'll certainly make sure it gets in front of the right people. And if it's in line with our goals and roadmap, then we can certainly get back to you. The other thing to consider is if you're looking for funding for your P2P marketplace, then you can certainly apply for finance. So go to the homepage, click apply for finance. It takes you about 5 minutes to enter your basic details, upload some of your investor details. And then our pitch management team will actually look at that application. Obviously, we do have a very low acceptance rate because we get so many applications, and we like to, have the deals that our investors are particularly looking for. But you can apply for finance there, or you can submit a partnership proposal, and we'll look at that in the future.
Great, thank you. Here is one from, I have a name for this one, it's Tony. Simon, will there be any meetups arranged for Bank to the Future members in London this year or anytime soon? I think it would be a good idea for a 20-minute slideshow and a speech from you and a 1-hour relaxed social afterwards.
I think that's a great idea that we can then put to our marketing team. We've never really done meetups. We've always been invited to other people's events. We've never done our own meetups. To help you understand kind of the internal things that are going on at BnkToTheFuture.com right now. We've been very aggressively expanding our technical team and our technical capabilities. And we're due to make some announcements in the coming months around some of the things that we've been doing there to expand our technical capabilities and expand the team. And we've also, the next thing we're really focusing on is while we're in the bear market and things are a little bit quieter, we're looking to really improve on our investor relations and customer service, expand the team, and implement better systems there. And then really throughout 2019, early 2019, we're really looking to expand the marketing team and focus more on marketing initiatives, investor outreach, and making sure we're more involved in these different things and meetups. So that's the kind of the areas of focus. And one of the things that we will be launching this year is a new career center for people that want to apply for opportunities to work within BnkToTheFuture.com. And this would be a question and something that we would put forward to our marketing team. For now, I haven't. We do frequent events, and I think we can get better at publishing the events I do. But the best way to find out where I'm speaking at the moment is by following me on Twitter, and my Twitter handle is at Simon Dixon Twit with a double T. But if you Google Simon Dixon Twitter, I'm sure I'll come up there.
Okay, I have a next question here. For the upcoming exchange, what will be the base currency for the listed tokens, BTC or USD? Is the process to determine each company's initial valuation based on the last capital raising, or a level determined as an equilibrium won by Bank to the Future and the company management?
So I think we'll start to release some more, screenshots and things that will tease and help people understand how we're looking to do this market. I do have to make a distinction between our secondary market and the exchange. The secondary market is not going to be a full-blown order book where you can do, high-frequency trading or normal trading like you would with a crypto exchange, for example, or a public company. What we intend on doing is allowing people to offer their shares to other people that want to purchase their SPV shares, and they can set the payment terms as well. Initially, we're probably going to be doing it, everything will be denominated in US dollar, and we'll be using our normal payment methods and expanding them and getting them better as we go. But it will be very much focused around is kind of like a technology that puts together OTC, people that want to make a over-the-counter trades with each other, allowing them to actually sell those and buy those, but it won't be a full-blown order book. Now, when we launch our securities token exchange, and what we're doing there is that the company, that would be a separate entity run by a separate team. We think that, personally, I believe that denominating things in US dollar is more understandable for people. It will also help them understand, because the pitches that often raise funding and people still think in dollar, most people don't think in Bitcoin and ETH. But will allow for having, with different things where you could be denominated in US dollar, but actually traded against Bitcoin or ETH. We do want to, I'm more of a Bitcoin person. We do want to make sure that we're looking at some of the innovations, some of the team, some of the people that are building a lot of the new core developments that are coming through in terms of tokenization and liquid networks on the Bitcoin protocol have been in touch with us, and we're trying to stay up to date with that. And then at the same time, Ethereum is certainly building an infrastructure around securities tokens with protocols like Polymath and Securitize and Harbor and other things that we're making sure that we're staying up to date with that. But the full decisions on that haven't been made. But the secondary market will certainly be denominated in dollar, allowing for multiple payment options. And we'll also get some feedback on that as we start to develop the market and it gets used further. In terms of what we'll actually be displaying, we're looking at displaying the history of the price of the underlying equity, so the company that the SPV invested in, and the history of the SPV pricing, and then people can decide at what prices they would like to put an offer out. And investors can come along and decide whether they think that's good value or not. And then obviously it's not a public market. There will be lots of risks involved in this in terms of access to information and making sure that all the correct, that investors understand the risks and that they've agreed to those risks and they know what they're signing up for.
Okay, the next question I have here is, we have recently received Tether instead of USD as dividends. Can we use this to invest in pitches just like we could any other cryptocurrency? If not, why not?
The answer is yes. I can't give away too much confidential information, but one of our portfolio companies is Bitfinex, and they have publicly disclosed that they do pay dividends to their investors. And so in order to make it easier, we give people the options and we actually pay in the same currency that we receive. And we are actually working with our dev team right now. We've got a bit of a disjoint right now, and I think that there's some very valid feedback here where people want to invest their Tether. They don't want to see it differently from US dollar. And in the upcoming roadmap, it's actually in there for this year to actually allow people to invest their USDT just like they would their USD. So that's certainly something we're going to do, and something we'll update you on as it gets rolled out.
Okay, the next question I have here is, considering the bear market, don't you think the utility and the price of BF token could be improved by offering to the member who holds 10K BFT not only the 48-hour access to the deals, but also some further discounts on the sale?
We negotiate discounts wherever we can, but really it all depends on if we can get it. We'll try and get that. And within the 48 hours head start, we do have deals that are going to be exclusively for BFT token holders. And I think it's a good suggestion, and we can certainly look at whether we can offer additional discounts to BFT token holders where the issuers are more interested in doing that. It's worth noting that as we switch more to equity, as the market is moving that direction and securities tokens, there's less flexibility in terms of giving some of the larger discounts that might be available in the utility token market. But I think it's a valid suggestion. in terms of utility for BF token. While we do have the priority access deals, that's one of the existing, we're also working on building the due diligence and investor relation reward system, which will require token holders to hold tokens to do that. We've got the BF wallet, whereby you can actually make it much easier to gain access to your membership with the BF tokens, and hopefully that will drive more adoption. And at the same time, then we've got the secondary market, allowing people to pay their trading fees and having the discounted trading fees if they use BFT, and having a great user experience whereby they don't even need to have necessarily the BFT. They could just be a token holder, and then it could auto buy into the market. These are some of the things that we're looking in order to increase the utility. But a bear market is a bear market. It doesn't really matter too much what you do in a bear market. The market forces are always greater than that, and it creates a great opportunity for people to get in at cheaper rates in order to access their memberships and purchase memberships at cheaper rates, and then wait for a market recovery when hopefully, if all goes to plan and the utility increases as we plan it to increase, then those memberships become more expensive for other people as the ecosystem grows.
Thank you for that. Just sifting through. So we have one here from Gareth Schumann. When are we expecting RSK to be listed on Bank to the Future, and will it be tokens or some other form of investment model? Will there be a minimum amount for BFT holders?
Yes, so we will be launching the RSK token sale on the platform. We have an allocation that we have already purchased, and we have decided that we were more than happy to keep that allocation because we're true believers in RSK, the company, the technology. We've known them for many years, and Diego was on our advisory team, the CEO of RSK. But we wanted to make that a reward for our BFT token holders, and the timing of us being able to release those tokens for people to subscribe, for our investors to subscribe to, is only once the token generation event happens. And we're in touch with the RSK team to find out when the token generation event actually happens. But the second that is the token generation event happens, the tokens will be issued, and then we'll be able to allow our members to purchase some of our allocation. But we're kind of in the hands of RSK in terms of timing on that. The pitch is ready. We're thinking, because it's going to be such a popular pitch, we've had so much interest and demand, I think we're going to have to cap people to probably $10,000 in terms of an actual purchase worth of Bitcoin. It is denominated in Bitcoin, but so it's a fixed price to Bitcoin. And yes, it is a token, and it's a token built upon the RSK network. And so they're obviously trying to overcome some of their technical hurdles to allow people to tokenize on top of Bitcoin through a side chain using the RSK network. And we think it's one of the most important and exciting technologies that we're eagerly awaiting to see a new user case for Bitcoin at the same time as some of the other competing technologies to allow Bitcoin to become more useful in those regards. So we are just waiting. It could happen anytime now. It could happen in a month or two. I think that their plans are to do the token generation event anytime soon. As soon as that is live, we'll be letting BFT token holders, we'll be notifying them first. So make sure that you are subscribed by maintaining a balance of 10,000 BFT on your account. You're verified, you've done all your documentation, you're a qualified investor, and then you can be at the ready to pay. Most likely, the only payment option will be Bitcoin in this case.
Okay, I have a nice detailed question here for you, Simon.
Okay.
Currently, it seems as though there are many projects building out technical architecture for security tokens on public blockchains like Ethereum. We have projects like Polymath, Harbor, BFT, etc. My question is around the future infrastructure surrounding security tokens. Do you believe the current platform out there, Ethereum, EOS, etc., are the best platforms we should be looking to launch security tokens on in the medium term? Or do you need a blockchain specifically for security tokens, and should it be a public ledger?
It's a really good question. And unfortunately, while I could forecast that, it would just be based upon our existing understanding of the crypto world. And our understanding of the crypto world tends to change every 3 to 6 months as the technology evolves. One thing is for certain is that most of the innovation is certainly, in terms of the securities token market, is certainly happening on Ethereum. And that is where we will be focusing most of our energy. At the same time, we're speaking to some of the Blockstream team, for example, around some of the technology that they're building on top of BTC, and making sure that we're up to date. But we've got to go with where most of the infrastructure is going at the moment. And protocols like Polymath. Some of our dev team went to Barbados at their recent roundtable, and they seem to be making a lot of progress in terms of building that protocol. To us, it's really important that we get synergy across the market. The reason for that is because I think if all we did as an industry is create a Tokyo Stock Exchange, a London Stock Exchange, and a New York Stock Exchange, but for securities tokens, then we would have made zero difference in the world. If we allow for the arbitrage and the quick moving of securities tokens between exchanges on a singular protocol, then that will be a real big a big shift in the way that the industry actually works, keeping the exchanges accountable, where you can actually switch them just like you could in the crypto market. So if you don't like Bitfinex and you move to Bitstamp, you move your Bitcoin over. If you don't like Bitstamp, you move over to Kraken. If you don't like Kraken, you use Shapeshift. If you don't like Shapeshift, you use a decentralized option. I think that's a really important component to try and keep, and that requires synergy amongst the different players in the ecosystem. So we're trying to keep on top of all this stuff. Initially, Ethereum is the winner in this market at the moment. We're looking at the Bitcoin solutions with RSK and some of the solutions Blockstream are building. And then obviously you've got the up and coming protocols, but it would be crazy for us to build a securities token exchange upon a technology that we're not even sure works yet, like EOS or something that's unproven. The other point to that is, at the end of the day, there is still room to get this wrong. The reason being is because securities tokens, by definition, can't be decentralized. We can allow for additional transferability, additional movement, whitelisting, clever processes, but the securities are not legally allowed to become bearer assets like Bitcoin, where they can be transferred freely between anyone. So therefore, when you're building a securities token, if you happen to launch it on Ethereum and it turns out Ethereum doesn't scale and the whole protocol burns down, then you can use a centralized service like BnkToTheFuture or something that can be built, which will allow you to do a one-to-one swap from one protocol to the other. An example of this is we invested in the Storage token cell, which was really, really early. It was built on top of Omni, which is a protocol that allows you to launch tokens on top of the Bitcoin network. And as transaction fees and speed actually became more of an issue in terms of these tokens, they decided that the community was building on Ethereum, so they just simply launched an ERC20 version of the same token and allowed people to do a one-to-one swap. So if you had an Omni token, you could use their technology, swap it for an Ethereum token, and everything is the same. So there are solutions for that. You don't necessarily have to get it 100% right and back the exact right horse. While that is a painful process, most of these securities tokens won't want to go through. I think there will be some casualties along the way where we might be using the wrong protocol or public blockchain. But I think that there are ways around that, and we can facilitate that, because inherently securities are more centralized than some of these decentralized bearer assets like Bitcoin.
Okay. We have about 15 minutes left of this stream. I suppose this question will be quite detailed in your answer. Could you give us some color on Bitcoin Capital 3 and each investment in this fund?
I would have to, because that is just for Bitcoin Capital 3 investors,
Yeah.
I have to keep that private just to Bitcoin Capital 3 investors. So we have the forum there. I know that there has been requests for me to do an AMA specifically for Bitcoin Capital 3 investors. But just so you understand, I can't reveal confidential information about companies unless I'm revealing it to the underlying shareholders in that SPV. So as much as I might want to do that, we give you access to the private investor zones of the actual companies that Bitcoin Capital 3 is an investor in, or if you invested directly. And we have to contain the information just for shareholders, because at the end of the day, these are private companies, there is confidential information, and if that information leaks, then it could work to the detriment of your investment, because there are plenty of people that would like to use that information against the company that you're actually a shareholder in. So it wouldn't work in your interest, it doesn't work in the company's interest. But I think in general, the question is, could we see an AMA or more further updates for Bitcoin Capital 3 as something we've got on the agenda to discuss in our team and see how we can improve that. So, but unfortunately, I can't discuss confidential shareholder information with non-shareholders.
Okay, thank you for that. I have a question here. It's about the vetting process. Can BnkToTheFuture please explain their process in vetting potential listings? What is the role of what is BnkToTheFuture's role when disputes arise with investors due to low due diligence?
So our role is to make sure that the information is factually accurate. And so when we take a pitch on, we ensure that that information, we look to do all we reasonably can to ensure that information is factually accurate. We also have a couple of safeguards in place. The first is that we tend to only work with companies that have already secured a reputable lead investor that has already completed due diligence, so that we can rely upon some of their due diligence as well. It's not always the case, but over 90% of the time, it would have been a lead investor that had already gone through some of the due diligence. Then we have our regulatory requirements and the KYC and disclosures that we have to put out there. But I think it's really important for people to understand the difference between a business pivoting and failing versus a business being, a scam or something like that, which is the most commonly word used in crypto. And so we do expect a lot of the companies that we put on the platform to eventually fail. But the idea is that people are building a diversified portfolio, and some of them fail for better reasons and other reasons. So the way that we tend to do things is when we get an application, we try and ensure that the pitch is factually accurate. We've done the KYC, that people know what they're investing in. We do the risk warnings. And then we also rely upon some of the due diligence conducted by the lead investor. And also sometimes we then open it up to the pitch forum, where investors might find something that we didn't necessarily find. And if that information is material, makes a big material difference in the offering, then we would either cancel that pitch or allow people to get a refund if they think, given that new information, that it's difficult. It's something they'd still like to change their mind about the investment before the period of refunds is over. So that's kind of the process we go through. We spend a lot of time. We do video conferencing with the clients. We spend about a month processing and getting all the information together, and we do all we can to ensure that. But that's the process we do. And one of the things and one of the reasons we launched the BF token was to also reward people for helping us and supporting us in finding some of the things that we may not necessarily have found, and engaging them in the due diligence and investor relations process, which is a user case for the token that we've started to launch, and we're looking to improve and improve further.
Okay, thank you, Simon. I think we have like 10 more minutes left, so I'm not sure how this is going to span out, but I'll throw one more question at you. Is it a certainty that security token offerings are going to be adopted and adopted in the US Securities and Exchange Commission?
I think that there is already an infrastructure to allow for securities exchanges, the exchange of securities tokens within the US infrastructure. The US securities law is pretty clear. It's got 506B or 506C offerings. 506C offerings can be promoted as long as investors are certified as accredited. 506B offerings can rely upon self-certification, but they can't be promoted outside of their close network. Then they have rules around lock-in periods, and they're pretty clear that you can comply with those. You definitely can't have bearer assets that can be traded amongst people without some of the whitelisting process. The exchange can exist under either a national exchange that implements a securities token infrastructure or an ATS. But I don't believe that the SEC will be signing off on any of these models anytime soon, and I think it's going to take a long time. I think the US would be one of the last to adopt. Is way more likely to come a lot sooner in some of the jurisdictions in the EU, maybe like Malta, Gibraltar, and some of the other jurisdictions like Barbados and other jurisdictions that are looking to move a lot faster and want to leapfrog stock markets. I think a lot of jurisdictions are getting, kind of stuck in their thinking of it as a stock market. But someone can come along and leapfrog that, and the country can create a jurisdiction to do that. But so the US, I think it will happen eventually. If you look at a case study, for example, the Jobs Act, which was designed, it actually came around after some of the work we did in the UK around opening up investment online. And then later that led to the Jobs Act, which modeled a lot of the stuff in the UK, but adapted it to US securities law. They were saying that the Jobs Act was going to be live, and it was approximately 4 years or 3 years after the deadline that the laws were actually implemented. And then by that time, token sales were actually disrupting equity crowdfunding. And token sales actually started to do what the Jobs Act was originally designed to do. So things take a lot longer in the US, and the US have the most to lose, essentially, as the existing leader with Wall Street and Silicon Valley.
Okay, I have a question here about Bitcoin. What do you consider to be the biggest threat to Bitcoin and the crypto space at large?
I don't see anything in the crypto space that competes with Bitcoin at all. Bitcoin is far and away the most decentralized. I don't see any internal threats, but I think it's great to see a lots of more centralized tokens coming along and trying to do things better that Bitcoin can learn from. I think that Bitcoin is our best shot in the world at sound money. I think there's going to be a game theoretical situation that arises in the next bull market where smaller central banks will be accumulating Bitcoin. And then a larger country, maybe something like Japan, will actually announce that they're diversifying their central bank holdings, not just with gold or dollars and yen, but also not just STRs, but they're also diversifying into Bitcoin. And in fact, I think they already would have at this stage. And I think whoever makes the first announcement will then leave the larger countries that have the most to lose from Bitcoin adoption, such as the euro or the dollar, will actually be the last to actually adjust to this, or PBOC trying to create their own versions. And so I see the biggest problem. I mean, the threats to Bitcoin have just always been there. It was always initially the biggest threat was negative PR, where people just thought it was a currency for drug dealers. But then again, while people still think, as long as there are people out there in the world that think that Bitcoin is a Ponzi scheme, a currency for drug dealers, or a scam, then that creates a store of value user case. Once the whole world knows that Bitcoin's not a scam, not a Ponzi scheme, and not just a currency for drug dealers, then at that point, the Bitcoin price will be stable. And it actually has a shot of becoming money or currency that people actually transact in, as opposed to use more as a store of value, as a way of sucking up savings out of fiat and allowing people to own their own money, spend their own money, and have a monetary policy that's based upon that rewards savers rather than rewards debtors like traditional fiat money. In terms of the biggest threats, I think many of them have come. You know, the China actually banning all the exchanges was one of the biggest threats. I think we'll probably see China come and try and do something with maybe banning mining would be the next thing that could come along. But I think that would just, it would decentralize, and we've seen how anti-fragile Bitcoin actually is. As every time someone tries to attack it, it becomes stronger. We've seen the internal community splits that only made Bitcoin stronger. We've seen scalability being tackled as the network grows. We are seeing layer 2 solutions, whether that's going to lead to some kind of centralization or doesn't prove to be some of the scaling solutions that we originally thought it would be, then time will tell. But I think Bitcoin is very anti-fragile. I think if the whole world decide to make it illegal, then it would just end up in a game theory situation where some of the smallest jurisdictions would put together the environment, and all the jobs and all the opportunities for growth and all, as we've seen, the disruption in traditional markets will then migrate out of jurisdictions like the US. I don't see the threat of competing blockchain-based national government currencies as a competition. I think if anything, it will make Bitcoin stronger because it will highlight the user case as a blockchain centralized currency created by a central bank or government, will just highlight that they're going to exercise more and more control over that, track more of your data, automate anti-money laundering laws that will make the user experience of money harder and harder to use. They'll start making cash illegal, and that will then drive people to Bitcoin as an alternative for their savings so that they can own it without some of the censorship that can happen there. There are, the threats have just always been the same throughout the time. It's always been, I think one of the biggest risks that we've seen and one of the biggest problems was when we had the infighting, when the Bitcoin community turned on each other over scalability, and people started actually, trying to win market share over Bitcoin by spreading a very negative word about Bitcoin. But then what we saw in 2017 is that Bitcoin grew the larger all the altcoins grew and the hard forks grew and people got wealthier in this industry. So it's very hard to say. It is still a risky experiment, but I think that I'm really optimistic about Bitcoin being sound money for the world, and the game theoretical situation occurring, and the most decentralized, non-political, no allegiance to any country, censorship resistant currency that I think it can be. I think really the biggest risk, if I'm going to summarize it as one, is that actually people will still continue to think in terms of fiat, and therefore, because they're thinking in terms of fiat, they will never think in terms of Bitcoin, in terms of pricing, and therefore it will always be volatile, and therefore people will use it less as a currency because the volatility and Gresham's law of trying to hoard it rather than spend it. But I think eventually that will be overcome when the whole world kind of accepts that Bitcoin is something that's here to stay, and therefore some of that volatility of the fixed or in relation to fiat currencies will pop out. And that also is why we're also interested in stable coins. Obviously, as a shareholder in Bitfinex, Tether was something that's been instrumental in the growth of the market, but we're seeing the challenges of a centralized model and look forward to seeing some of those decentralized stable coins, even launched by governments. Those will happen, and then the world can decide what type of dollar they want to use. But it won't make Bitcoin weaker, because Bitcoin is that decentralized network that actually has no allegiance to any country. And as soon as one country tries to attack it, another country sees that as an opportunity. So I think that's probably a really good time and point to end this on. I think we're probably right on the hour, if not exactly on time. Thank you for your questions. And we look forward to doing AMA session 4. Fam, I think you did a great job. Thank you for stepping in and providing those questions.
That's great. Thank you, guys. Thanks, everyone. See you again soon.
Bye-bye.
Bye.